know that the workforce industry is really looking for not just graduates, but also graduates who bring some added value. And so micro credentials of different kinds are significant value for an employer if they align with their mission.
Welcome to the Coursera podcast, where we have conversations with renowned experts and industry leaders to explore global trends impacting the future of education and work. I'm your host, Arunab Sinha, Vice President of Global Communications at Coursera. As the job market keeps shifting and skills-based hiring picks up speed, universities are rethinking how they prepare students for success. These days, nearly 9 in 10 students say that they want credentials tied to a real-world career outcome. And 90% of employers, they say that they are more likely to hire someone who has them. In response, forward-thinking universities are acting. Texas State University recently launched a campus-wide partnership with Coursera's Career Academy to offer professional certificates from leading companies like Google, Meta, and IBM. But what makes this story remarkable isn't just the scale of this rollout, it is how it began. A student saw a need, proposed a solution, and helped shape a strategic university initiative that now spans the entire campus community. Joining me today are two people at the heart of this journey: Dr. Pranesh Ashwath, Provost and Executive Vice President of Academic Affairs at the Texas State University, and Adam Long, a computer science student and student government senator whose advocacy helped bring this program to life. Dr. Ashwath, Adam, welcome to the Coursera podcast. We are so excited to have you here.
Well, thank you, Arunav. It's really a pleasure to be here as well. I've been engaged with Coursera for many, many years, and this is a delightful opportunity to share the platform with you and talk about our experiences. And certainly, I'm happy to have Adam here as well from the student side. So delighted to join you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me on. I'm looking forward to sharing the student perspective and what it entails.
This is actually the first time when we have two guests at the same time on the podcast, and I couldn't think of a better situation in which we will have this. So let me start with you, Adam, because the whole initiative really began with you. You wrote a letter asking Texas State to partner with Coursera. What sparked that? What were you hearing from fellow students that made you take that action?
Yeah, I'm kind of going to rewind a little bit. From a student government perspective, from a student perspective, it's not always, and I know I'm the author of the letter, but it's not just me. It's the entire student government body that kind of works and votes on certain actions that we're going to take and certain recommendations we make. And so a lot of this was Dr. Oswath invited me to just a meeting, just basic introductory, seeing if it would work, how it's going to be, things like that. And from there, I was like, okay, this is a good idea. I'm going to talk it over with my fellow student senators and see if this is something that they would be interested in. And everyone was basically on board, which I was not expecting, because usually there's someone that doesn't like it or a little bit of a non-unanimous disagreement. But we had our recommendation pass unanimously throughout the student government, and then I've just been kind of taking it from there, making checkups and follow-ups to kind of see what happens with it. And I know it went live a few days ago, maybe a week or so ago, and I've been able to access it, and it's great. And honestly, from the fellow students, it's just kind of a deal of that one more thing that you can add to your resume, or one more skill that you're able to learn to really add authority, I guess, to your viewpoint and your person and your skill set.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Ashwath, Adam's letter wasn't just heard, it helped shape a campus-wide initiative. From your perspective, what made this idea resonate? And how do you think about responding to student-led ideas and initiatives?
Well, Arunav, as a student-centered university, I take things that come from student government and students in general very seriously. I knew Adam Long from the fact that he was the IT liaison for the Student Senate. Adam is a unique person. He is one of those few people that just doesn't participate in things, he engages. He engages in the IT governance structure, he engages with the leadership at the institution. And so I got to know Adam quite well, and I said, okay, here's someone who understands my language. He's a CS major as well. I've been very engaged with Coursera in the past in my prior institution. I saw the value that it brought for students, particularly credentials of value for students, not necessarily for students with a CS major, but really more so for those students who didn't have a CS major but were looking to enhance their credentials and have certification that would help them engage with the workforce in a more meaningful way. So I engaged with Adam, brought this idea to him. I said, I'm trying to work this, I'm trying to get consensus at the cabinet level at the university. However, I need to have a broader appeal, not just coming from top down. But I said, try this out, check it out, and see if this is something you guys would be interested in, and if this is of value for you as students. And one of the unique aspects of this is it's not just a letter, Aruna. This was a Senate resolution. The big difference. A letter is one thing where a student writes a letter. I get letters all the time. They don't carry the same weight as a resolution passed by the Senate. And the resolution that Adam actually penned was voted on by the Senate, and that carries a lot of weight. I always tell our friends in student government that if you really want to impact change, it's not done one at a time. It's when you bring consensus and you bring forth ideas that a broad swath of students believe is of value for them. So I always encourage our student government to put forth resolutions that they feel are valuable for the entire student body. And that will be something that I can take to the president, I can take to my deans to kind of operationalize and say, hey, this is important for our students. They are asking for this because this is of value for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. This was a true example of a student, faculty, provost, administrator partnership in some sense.
Yes.
And so, from a provost point of view, why was now the right time to launch? Because I'm sure that you got this demand, which was widely unanimous, but you also have to tie that with meta trends happening and shaping the world of education.
Correct.
And how do you see this program supporting universities' role in helping students navigate a fast changing job market?
Well, I can give you several examples. I engage with external stakeholders, which are companies, and I ask the broader question, are we preparing our students appropriately for the workforce? Is a Texas State student have the right skills? Broadly speaking, they love our students. I can tell you that. When I talk to employers, they say our Texas State students are hungry. They come without pretense. They're willing to work hard. They're willing to roll up their sleeves. But at the same time, they also tell me that it takes a certain amount of time to upskill them for the job at hand. And that one of the things that they would greatly appreciate is coupled with the broad-based liberal education that universities provide, is to also provide them credentials of value that can help them navigate their workspace in a shorter period of time, that they are actually able to differentiate themselves with respect to other applicants. So I know that the workforce industry is really looking for not just graduates, but also graduates who bring some added value. And so micro credentials of different kinds are significant value for an employer if they align with their mission of what they're trying to accomplish. So that's where I see Coursera Career Academy with a broad based set of credentials, not just in IT, but across a variety of different disciplines, adding value for students with a variety of different majors.
That's fantastic. And Adam, you are studying computer science and already interning. What value do you see in earning professional certificates alongside your degree? Something which Pranesh talked a little bit about. And was there any micro credential that really stood out, any professional certificate that stood out for you?
Yeah, I think from not just my perspective, but computer science students as a whole, especially in this job market right now, you see a lot of people that are very, very talented and they're very, very strong and know what they're doing. They come in, they go out, they got massive scaled projects. And so I like to use the term when everyone's super at what they do, no one is super at all. And these professional certificates can really help you get that extra skill, that extra piece of additional information or that additional skill set that can really help develop your ability to be an asset to a company or be an asset to a startup. And so you're starting to see a lot of people kind of do these micro credentials. I know me specifically, I plan on going into data. And the thing about that is at Texas State University, we have a computer science program, but it's very broad and it's intentional to be that way. That way you can kind of seek out those very specific things that you want to really hit home about. And data is my thing. And so I really think getting a professional certificate that narrows my path even further, that really dives deep into that very specific area, is what I'm kind of looking into.
Got it. Got it. And Dr. Ashwath, the program's launched, and but Texas State University already has momentum, record enrollments last fall, and now a new workforce readiness initiative as well. How does this fit into sort of the broader goals you're setting for the university?
We're very fortunate, Aaron, now being where we are and the attractiveness of Texas State that is bringing a record number of applications here. We are likely to have another record class this coming fall, over 9,000 freshmen coming into Texas State in the fall of 2025. So we have an obligation to continue to support these students with credentials of value. They're coming here because of our portfolio of academic programs. There's no question about it. That's the reason they're coming here. And the quality of education and the curricular and co curricular activities we provide. It's sort of a whole portfolio of things that brings students here. So I see by the time the students graduate, we need to prepare them to a workforce that may be radically different from the one they started out coming to. 4 years is a long time. I never thought I would say that. I thought 4 or 6 years was a relatively short period, but now 4 to 6 years, technology changes, the expectations in the marketplace change. So curriculum doesn't change at a rapid pace like that. However, augmenting our curriculum, which is meant to give you a broad-based education, as Adam just mentioned, with micro credentials are going to be critically important. And we want to be a differentiator by partnering with you and making this available to every single student on our campus. I am hopeful that many students will take advantage of this opportunity. And I can tell you from my past experience, one of the things I had focused on in the past, which I would like to do here as well, is to look at those majors that students choose because of their passion, but don't necessarily give you a degree that brings you a high salary. And so you're investing to go to college, and the expectation is you have a return on investment and you're able to pay off your debt. But if you're a theater major, or you're an English major, or you're a dance major, it could very well be that you're following your passion, but when you get out into the workplace, that may not necessarily be a profession that will provide you a salary that will be sufficient for you to not only pay off your loans, but also lead to a good quality life. But what if a student in theater also gets a certificate in project management or in real estate or any of those things? It may be data as well, could be in any of those things. Then they have a value add. They can continue to follow their passion, which is the reason they came to Texas State. And perhaps with Texas State, they can follow that passion, but they also have a secondary career where they can actually earn meaningful money by getting the micro credentials that will actually get them those specific type of jobs. So I see this as a not either or, but it's a add on to what you get in your traditional 4 year degree, is to add on additional credentials, or it could also be standalone. For example, we're trying to get this out to our alumni who want to upskill. They may have got a degree in something else 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and now they're looking to upskill themselves. Otherwise they would typically have to pay for this. Now we are actually offering this as a benefit for our alumni as well. So there's a lot of opportunities, not only for our current students, but also for our alumni.
And you would agree that there is also an element of multidisciplinary education, which is like, even if you're in certain, because every field is getting reshaped by AI, data science, cloud, mobile.
Mhm.
And what implication does it have even on traditional industries, something that one should really understand?
Things like AI and data, which Adam was mentioning, is infused in every discipline. It's not the realm of computer scientist anymore. If you're maybe working in large language models, yeah, that's what a CS person does. But the average person who works in any other field is essentially a consumer of AI, is a consumer of data. So they need to be aware not only the lingo that goes with it, but also to understand at least the basics of how the technology works under the hood so that they're able to use the technology in a more meaningful way to enhance what they're actually doing in their current workplace, whether it's in real estate, putting together ads for real estate could be done using AI. There are a number of those such examples that you see that AI essentially enhances what you're currently doing. And so having a basic understanding of AI, what is the technology, how do you use it, and what's the value proposition, and what are the limitations of this will be critically important. So a micro credential in that area will meet the needs of those people who don't want to be an AI specialist, but just want to be a consumer of AI or a user of AI.
That's totally right. And Adam, from your conversation, something that you might be hearing from your peers as well, in your role as a part of the student body as well, what kind of skills are students most excited about building right now? Are you seeing like growing interest in areas like AI or other trends that kind of stand out even for those who are pursuing more traditional majors?
Yeah, so you mentioned AI and just like data things, and I think that's very impactful. And I really see this in STEM fields. So your computer science, your math, your engineerings, those kinds of students are definitely, most of them are kind of going towards the AI. I'd say like half, if not more, of the peers that I talk to day are like, oh, I want to go into artificial intelligence or machine learning or some sort of AI language model. There's so many different fields now as technology is growing at an exponential rate. But it's not also just about my college, but it's also about, as Dr. Oswald was saying, the theater majors and everyone else that's not just in STEM. And I'm really seeing students also, especially in the art fields, who might not have that AI kind of taste yet, or who aren't as excited because they might not necessarily know the capabilities of it. And I think having these micro credentials in the hands of the students will allow them to better, I guess, wrap their heads around not just the idea of AI or programming or data, but other fields too. I know Cardinal Health has one for like exercise sciences or something like that. There's other credentials out there. So I know Dr. also was kind of saying it's kind of an add-on. So if you were a theater major, maybe get a micro credential in data. I also see it as a additional. So if you're a computer science major, add on a data aspect to further enhance what you are currently doing, not just break off and kind of go down two paths, if you will. So as far as like growing interest, it just kind of depends on what field the students are in. I mean, university is filled with so many unique and diverse perspectives. I know in STEM, a lot of people are on the AI train for the most part, but also in the arts, you might see other people that are kind of just looking into other things. And I think that micro credentials are giving you that diversity so that you can go into data, but you can also go and do this other thing, or you can go further into business, if you will. So it just depends on what the student, I guess, wants or needs, and it's able to adapt to that.
Dr. Ashwath, we talked a little bit about from a student perspective, but you've led digital transformation across multiple institutions, and I want to understand the role of micro-credential per se in broader sort of higher education. Also, this notion and how do you navigate, and I'm sure that when you have these conversations with faculty and administrators and your peers and professors, where the trust for the credentials come from, because you talk a lot about giving people a marketable credential at the end. And now you're looking at integrating micro credential, which may come from another institution altogether. How will you integrate? How do you see all this sort of interplay emerging?
I don't know. That's a very important question because one of the challenges you face is all micro credentials are not the same. Badges are not the same. There is no set of standards, unfortunately, that have been set up. Historically, the Department of Education had a criteria of what a credit means, right? A 3 credit course or a 1 credit course means. So people had a certain amount of understanding of how many contact hours you had and what was the likelihood of what you learned in that time frame. The challenge with micro credentials is Coursera, at least at one level, it's a known entity. You have some minimum threshold standards before you actually produce a micro credential that you put out. But that's not always the case at institutions. Each institution is different, and they tend to put out micro credentials in different shapes, forms, durations, and so forth. So it's very, very hard, very honestly, to take micro credentials from another institution and incorporate it into your curriculum because you really don't know what exactly that micro credential has. So, credit for prior learning is a critical part of the micro credential strategy that we are employing here at Texas State. So, as we are creating our own degrees that incorporate micro credentials from Coursera, we are also going to have in parallel a credit for prior learning process that will evaluate the extent and amount of learning and skills that have been developed as part of the micro credentials to determine the level of credit that we are willing to award for a micro credential that you bring to the table. So, by setting up some minimum thresholds and standards, we will then be able to evaluate micro credentials in a more holistic way and come up with a more standardized methodology by which we can award credit so that then you can incorporate that credit that you award for prior learning into a degree program potentially. So this is sort of unique. I mean, a lot of people have talked about it, but not very many are doing it. There are certain places that award learning for prior credit, primarily military credit and things of that nature, that ACE, American Council of Education, has some standardized methodologies. So we are actually working with you guys to incorporate some of your micro-credentials into a couple of degrees. I see that as an exciting next phase in which we are actually incorporating externally developed micro credentials. Internally, on the other hand, we will have both micro credentials that would be available for students as part of their journey as an undergraduate student. But in the longer run, we will also have micro credentials which will be standalone, which would be similar to certificates that we historically award. We are essentially taking a certificate and making it into a micro credential. A good example will also be one where you have a minor. A minor is typically about 18 credit hours, which yields you a minor, but we could provide a micro credential in that minor. So we are looking at various different strategies, but we're also looking at setting up what we would call minimum standards at our institution for what a micro credential should actually be, so that there is a certain minimum threshold that has to be passed before we would award a badge for our own internally developed micro credentials.
You're really forward thinking on this subject in many ways, Dr. Ashworth. And Texas State University is also a well resourced university, but there are also many institutions around the world who do not have access to kind of resources you have. They have faculty shortages, they have classroom shortages, they may not have the technology and curriculum to respond very quickly to emerging technologies like Gen AI. Do you think micro credentials have a role to play in countries like India, Latin America, and Africa and other places to quickly revamp their curricula?
Yes, it does because it's a low cost way to get a foot in the door. If you're unable to get a college education, micro credentials can upskill you to a point where you can actually significantly enhance your earning power. So, in third world countries, this would be a huge value add. You don't need to spend 4 years of college to get to a place where you can start making a reasonable living much higher than what you could make with a high school degree. So I see this as a entry point, and I see this also as an entry point here for graduate school. For example, if you're able to build a stackable degree at the graduate level, a student who's out in the workforce may not think it's worth their while to reinvest to go back to college, but you would reinvest to upskill yourself. And then you realize you've taken a micro credential which gives you 9 credits or 12 credits of academic credit, and you realize, well, I'm halfway through my master's. So if I want to get a master's, then I have to spend another 6 months or a year. And so for a student who doesn't want to go back to grad school, this could be an entry point to upskill, which would eventually lead to a stacked degree. So I see that in the longer term, when we design new degree programs, that we need to build them in a stackable format. We should not be building them in a linear format where you have to do things in a very linear way, where if you don't go through a certain path, you're never going to get a degree. You should be in a place where you are in a carousel method where you can step on and step off. And so you can step on when you're ready and you can step off when you're off. But you build your credentials as a part of your journey that at some point that stackable credentials result in a full-fledged degree. So that should be the path we take. It's not always possible, but you need to have forward-thinking faculty who are willing to work with you on that.
That's a very important advice for institutions around the world. Adam, let's bring it full circle. For other student leaders listening who want to make an impact on their own campuses, what advice would you give them?
Luckily, I've had 3-ish years to figure this out and get good at being or at least I'd hope being decent at a student leader.
We are still figuring this out, Adam. Pranesh and I are still figuring this out, so you're not late.
But really, it comes down to two key things, I think. And the first one is just networking. And it doesn't have to be a whole lot. Just get to know some administrators at your school. And that might be difficult because most of them don't really teach any classes. They're in the office in meetings quite frequently, very busy, doing a lot. But if you're able to get into contact with one or two of them, I know what I did personally is I work in IT with our CIO, and I was just like, hey, can I come to the football game? And he was like, yeah, and then gave me tickets to the president's suite. And there I was able to meet all the VPs, everyone that kind of had a stake at the higher level. And I was able to kind of give them a perspective as a student and kind of show them what life is like still getting a degree, because I'm sure when they went to university 20, maybe 30, maybe even 40 years from today, it was way different. And so being able to have that conversation, I think, is very important, and that helps establish who you are. And then the second piece of advice is using that kind of base that you've established is find solutions to problems around campus. And I know for our campus and a lot of campuses around the nation and world specifically, parking is usually an issue. And I'm going to this because one of the big things is I know a lot of people are just like, oh, can we put a 10,000 car parking garage right in the center of campus? And unfortunately, there's no tangible solution to that. But if you can find small wins or even big wins that have tangible solutions, and if you can even make a plan or a proposal, give facts, give data, like bring that student perspective in and really show the admins and the faculty and the staff who have a say in the very high level policy decisions, you can really make an influence at your campus. Because at the end of the day, the faculty, the staff, the administrators, the students, we're all on one team, and it's to bring value to the students. They're very willing to listen to you. They just need that extra push, that data to back up kind of what you're saying from the student perspective. And I think that is some of the biggest pieces of advice I can give.
Dr. Ashwath, Adam, thank you both for being here and for sharing your story. It's been such a valuable conversation and a powerful example of what can happen when academic leadership and student voices come together to meet the moment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Aruna. This is a great opportunity to share our perspective, and I really enjoy talking to Adam whenever I get a chance. So this is great to have a tri-party discussion.
Yeah, and likewise, thanks for having me on. I really do enjoy being a part of these conversations because I know from a student perspective, sometimes we wonder what the decision making is like. And I'm very fortunate to be a part of that process and to be invited to opportunities like this one. Thanks for having me.
Preparing students for the workforce doesn't mean compromising on the quality or depth of a university education. It means enhancing it with flexible, job-aligned learning that supports lifelong opportunities. If you're curious to learn how Coursera is helping campuses launch initiatives like this, visit coursera.org/campus. If you enjoyed this episode of the Coursera podcast, please rate, review, and share. Until next time, I'm Arun Sinha. Thank you for tuning in.